So, first wanted to say a big thank you to Ash Goss from Stella Circle for continuing to promote our COP and letting folks know that we do offer these once a month. Um, and just wanted to also remind everybody about our upcoming sessions as well. So our next one is going to be on Friday, April 24th, called The View from Within, How UDL Transforms the Student Experience, which is kind of a part two to today's session because Alison and Elaina will be rejoining us to highlight student perspective as they experience UDL in their classes. Immediately 2 weeks after that one, on May 8th, which is another Friday, we had Creating Accessible Spaces, Autism Acceptance and Understanding Through UDL, where Kristen Winter, who is a navigator from the Autism Society of Newfoundland and Labrador, will explore the impact of the learning environment for autistic learners and how UDL can be used to create more accessible classrooms. I also wanted to remind everybody as well about the different resources that we have on our website. So, of course, most of you have probably registered through the website. So it is udlcopnl.ca. And on our website, we also have a section called Community News. And I'm going to copy this into the chat. And it's a blog, and there's different sections and it's for you to share your experiences with UDL. So for those who are interested in sharing those experiences, please do. We love to see those, and hopefully in the event, in the future, we'll be able to highlight people's experiences just to really prove and show that UDL is successful and can be used in so many different environments. All right, so to get started, a big, warm, and big thank you to Alison and Elaina for joining us today for this session titled Building Lifelong Agency, UDL in the K-12 Classroom. Alison is a K-12 program implementation specialist with NLSchools, working mainly with schools in the Mount Pearl and CBS areas. She has over 20 years of teaching experience, mainly focused in English, social studies, and as a teacher librarian. She has an avid interest in young adult literature with a focus on providing non-trauma based diverse books to students as choices within their classroom and personal reading. Alison has observed the power of using UDL tenets in her curriculum and is hopeful that her ideas will spark conversation and ideas in others. Elaina is a K-12 program implementation specialist with NLSchools, supporting schools across the Avalon Peninsula. With over 20 years of experience in education, she has a diverse background that includes classroom teaching from kindergarten to grade 12. Additionally, Elaina brings valuable leadership experience to her role, having served as both an assistant principal and principal. Elaina is passionate about universal design for learning and has been an advocate in the K-12 school system for the last 6 years. So in this session, they're going to be exploring ideas of building learner agency within the K-12 school system, and through discussion of their personal learning journeys into UDL, including lessons learned from their students, they hope to build understanding of the facets of learner agency in all aspects of life. So I will hand it over to both of you now.
All right, thank you. That was a mouthful, Jordan. Well done.
Wow, yeah, good work.
All right, so I will share my screen, hopefully. Hopefully, let me know if you can see it. Are we able to see that?
Yep.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I've got the clicker. So Alison is going to start us off. And
okay. Well, to start, I just want to thank Amy and the UDL COP for giving us this space today to discuss our experiences and our learnings around UDL and learner agency. As Jordan said, we're going to be sharing our personal journeys through UDL, where in our own ways, we developed an understanding of UDL and the power of learner agency within our learning community, and just how we both got to that point. They're two very different stories, but at the same time, they intersect in ways that you kind of go, oh, okay, didn't see that coming, but yet, it makes sense, at least as we discussed it. We're really excited to share and add to this conversation in this community of practice as we talk about our lens in the K-12 world. So we have a land acknowledgement. This was one done by a member of our provincial team. And what she did was gathered pictures and quotes from people on our provincial team and put them together as our own acknowledgement. So we thought we would show that and share that with you today. So Elaina, when you are ready.
Okay, so the tech might be a little tricky. Can everybody see the land acknowledgement?
Yeah,
Can you
we
see
can
that?
see it.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going. Can you hear it okay?
We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded lands of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, Inuit, Métis, and all First Nations peoples of Newfoundland and Labrador, whose connection to this land spans millennia. We honor their cultures, traditions, and the enduring relationship they have had with the land, the sea, and all its resources. Our bond with this land is sacred and strengthened through outdoor experiences. Whether walking trails, kayaking waters, hunting and fishing, or simply enjoying all the natural beauty that calms our spirits and clears our minds. These moments, shared with family in the forests, on the rivers, or at family cabins, ground us and deepen our connection to both our ancestors and the land. We are grateful for the wildlife, the trees, and the vast landscapes that sustain us. Through stories passed down by our elders, we learn the importance of respecting and protecting the land. These teachings remind us of our responsibility to safeguard its resources for the 7 generations to come. We recognize the ongoing impact of colonization and commit to healing, reconciliation, and ensuring the voices and rights of Indigenous peoples are respected. Together, we celebrate this shared home, embracing the gifts of nature and fostering respect for all that it supports.
So thank you for your attention with that and your appreciation and acceptance of our sharing of our connections with the land. And past that, we want to thank you for sharing this time with us. In the chat, if you could put in your name and the lens or background that you bring to this session, just so we have a sense of who we are speaking with, and so that we can, when possible, acknowledge and honor the lens that you come here with. Okay, New Brunswick, that's fantastic. Excellent pre-service teacher. Jacqueline, is that here in the province?
Yeah, I'm at McMaster. Sorry, not McMaster. That was 20 years ago. I'm at Memorial. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Jordan, wow, love it. Future educator. Getting to know who's in our space is really important to Alison and I, because we know how precious time is. So we are going to try our best to be as responsive to who you are in the context that you bring, so we can hopefully bring some examples or maybe relevancy, making our session as relevant and meaningful to you as we possibly can. That's really important to us. So thanks for taking a few minutes to share who you are with us. We really appreciate it.
And it's so great to see such a diverse range of people, just because it kind of reinforces what we are talking about here today, which is how UDL really can unite so many and people coming with so many backgrounds and diverse needs and ideas. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, Lucinda, working on moving into the school system here in Newfoundland. Woohoo! I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing that. Really appreciate it. Okay. All right, Allison, are we ready? Do you want to move on?
I think so.
Okay.
So our goal today is to build understanding of how UDL in the K-12 classroom can lead to learner agency. And we're specifically talking about our classrooms, but in our current roles, we are able to help others in that. But our story is of our K-12 classrooms and what it is that we learned from them.
Great. So, Allison, maybe for the sake of the people in the call,
Mhm.
I'm just thinking we should explain a little bit about our role right now as program implementation specialist.
There.
So we're teachers, we'll always be teachers. It's just that our class right now is a little different. So our class are teachers in our schools. So for me, I have 24 schools that I am responsible for. So it's like spans the whole Avalon Peninsula from Belle Island right to Trepassey. So I've got a lot of different configurations of schools, from semesterized high schools to very small rural K to 12 schools. So I support teachers in all facets of K to 12. So teaching, learning, assessment, curriculum, implementation, development, all the things is all under my umbrella of what I do right now. So having this lens and mindset of universal design for learning is really important, because we not only work with our students, we're working with teachers, adult learners.
Exactly. And so I do the same role as Elaina, but my schools are a little more in a focused area. I have Mount Pearl and and a number of the CBS schools, and then I have some out in Whitburn, Blaketown area. So it's a number of different configurations and I guess different ways that courses are offered. Even, two schools that are across the road from each other, they offer different things. And so we work with our families of schools, which is what our area of schools is called, within a team each. So there's math people, there's a French person, there's a student services person, and a director of schools, and a safe and inclusive itinerant. So, but our role really within them is we are one of the two K-12 people. So we work with teachers from kindergarten up through grade 12, and we look at, ways to support our teachers to ensure that the curriculum is honored, but that they are supported and have help with anything that they find that they might have a need in. I told some teachers the other day, we do everything but correcting, right? Because I'm not going to take home their English essays.
All right, Miss.
Okay, so in the context of your line of work, whether it's studying or working outside of the home every day or anything like that, what is the meaning of the word agency? And what does it look like, feel like, and sound like? And if you want to share that in the chat, and I saw the note there that if we want that the recording isn't capturing the chat, so we will read some out. Or you can unmute and just share, in your context, what is the meaning of agency?
And the purpose of doing this, I guess to give you a little context, we are sharing our stories today to help understand how we helped our learners build agency. So we want to first think a little bit about what agency is, what it means in your context, so that again it can be more meaningful and relevant to what where you are in your, I guess, work and life. So that's kind of giving you context for that. So what is the meaning of agency? What does it look like, feel like, and sound like?
Yeah. And I can see lots of people are typing, so that's awesome.
And we will read them out. I never thought about the whole comments not showing up in the recording, so thanks, Amy, for that
Yes.
reminder. I love it. Okay, so Jason says, what I do matters. I have control over things in my life. Awesome.
Oh,
Absolutely.
totally.
Jacqueline says, having the ability to make our choices that suit our individual needs, interests, and desires, power to make choices, and knowing that you hold that power. It's so important. And Heather says, I think it's about being an active participant in one's own learning. The simplest way I would state it. I think about that too sometimes,
Yeah.
like you know it in your head, but it's how do you put it in a sentence or two? Because agency in itself is big. It's a lot. So Heather, I appreciate that. And
Okay, and
Amy,
Amy, to me, agency captures self-determination and decision-making and being able to do so in an authentic way that reflects your identity self. Exactly, right? Having that ability to make the decisions and stay authentic, so that it does reflect who you are. So really, agency is that power and capacity of an individual to make intentional choices, take purposeful action, and influence their own learning and life outcomes. We see this in every area of life. And so think about, what is it that stands out when we look at this definition? What words stand out to you as we look at this? Um, when we look at every area of life and our abilities to assess situations, identify goals, ask questions, see a problem and solve it. Like when we look at that term agency and that specific definition, from your understanding of agency, which y'all are so good at, what are the words that stand out there um, as you read that particular definition?
and Allison, I think a lot of them already nailed it. I'm
Oh, I think
seeing
so.
in the comments there, active participant, as Heather said, owning one's learning, focusing on the individual. Thank you, Jason. The ability to
Yes.
make choices, so the capacity. So they're nailing it all together. Jordan says in
Oh, I love that,
archaeology,
Jordan.
yeah, in archaeology, we also apply the concept of agency to past individuals, groups, and even objects. Ooh, so important to remember that people from thousands of years ago aren't too different from us when it comes to agency. Wow. Okay, Jordan, I'm going to have to reflect on that
Love
one.
that.
Me too. Jacqueline says power and capacity. Jason says purposeful. And Heather says choices, interests, capacities, variability, and belonging. I love it. It's perfect. Good
Oh,
stuff. Good stuff. So when we think about agency, and we're here to talk about agency and learning, but when we think about agency for all, that we like what does that look like, feel like, sound like? And that's kind of why we wanted to dig into that definition prior to um it's so funny, and maybe it's because of my own bias, or whenever I hear the word universal design my ears perk up. So a few times now, watching the news and listening to radio, for example, I'm hearing universal design, and I'm waiting for the word learning, but it never comes. But what it is, Newfoundland right now is focusing on, there are some companies right now, contract companies, focusing on universal design, universally designing buildings and structures, making living accessible to all. And I did I didn't even get their permission, and maybe I should have. I have linked a particular company that I just Googled to kind of share that, universal design is everywhere in our world right now, and so it should be. When I think about the universal design, and that's how universal design for learning started in the first place, when you look at, how to make infrastructure universally accessible to everybody, that when we think about people with exceptionalities or even limitations, physical limitations, it may be a little bit easier to anticipate some of the barriers. For example, if you are in a wheelchair and you're thinking about your living arrangements in your home, it's easy for you and I, like I am not in a wheelchair, but I can anticipate pretty easily and see pretty easily that anything of height is going to be a barrier for somebody that's confined in a wheelchair. People that have vision limitations, of course, it may be a little bit easier to understand and see and predict the barriers for that. But when it comes to learning is so abstract, you can't see learning. So we're relying on cognitive science, we're relying on research, we're relying on, all the things out there right now to help us understand how learning happens. But there's so many nuances in that, because we may understand the process of learning, but in every little piece of that, there's so much variability in that. So that's why universal design for learning is so important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I don't have to convince anybody here, but it kind of makes, I guess, us looking at learner agency that much more important, because when we begin to think about, and I'm going to bring it back to our context in education, that education is the vehicle for everything else in our world. And we really need to get it right to make education accessible for all learners. And this is where learner agency comes in. So when we look at this definition of learner agency from Katie Novak, referring to the capacity of students to take ownership of their learning, make informed choices, and actively participate in their educational journey. Well, it's the same thing as agency that we just looked at, only for the learning component is there. So in our world, and some of you who are on the call as well, in the education world, really it's on us to make sure that we are doing everything in our control and power to make learning, make the environments in which our learners are in, or the people around us are in, to reduce as many barriers as possible. Which comes to our next slide from CAST, around the whole idea that it's about changing the environment rather than the learner, that makes learner agency possible. And when I began my own learning journey about UDL, and that was an aha moment for me, it gave me so much hope, because we can't control other people. We can't control how somebody learns. We can't control the experiences and, the background knowledge and the previous, pieces that makes everybody so unique. But when I was learning more about UDL, and I saw that it's not about that, it's not about fixing the person, it's about fixing and controlling the environment around them. And the other really cool thing I love is that we are a part of that environment. So I can only control what I do, but I know that I'm a part of the learner environment, and I can control the things that I do and the things that I say and how I say it and all of those great things, which again, it gives me a lot of hope for learning in general. So I hope I explained that okay. How did I do, Alison? Did I get it?
Oh, you rocked it.
Woo! All right.
Yeah. So that's the thing. When we're talking about education, we are talking about the educator in the classroom as well as the students and how those relationships work together. And I was reading a book that's not specifically about UDL, but is about basically moving students to a student-driven learning experience. So taking, I guess, explicitly teaching students to be more independent and drive their own learning. And this particular graphic was there, and it compared teaching to, teaching people to drive and bringing in all the different roles. And so, like, are you in the control tower telling them what's right or wrong? Are you having fun with students driving in loop-de-loops? Are you heading off a collision because the dynamics are wonky between some students and you're trying to stop conflicts? Are you telling them where to start and stop? Are you in the center of it, orchestrating everything and having the classroom orbit around you? Are you on the edge, observing how students are using the course that you set out? Or are you one car lane over, driving alongside, maybe a little behind, and watching what's going on? And the author of the book, Sarah Zerwin, made the point that really you should be everything but role 5, right? In the center of it, orchestrating everything, that the classroom is around you. She said, really, you have to be all of these things. You have to fend off the collisions. You have to tell them what is going right and wrong and honor your curriculum. You have to be there observing, and you have to let them go. And that's, bringing that balance to a classroom. And with that, we need to ensure that there's balance of your role and theirs, and that students are making choices in a place that's safe for them to explore and to fail and to succeed and to figure out what that actually means. And so that's, I guess, where we come in with all of this and how our journeys worked as we go through our time in the classroom. So we're going to get a little more specific and get into, our actual journeys that, we're talking about. And so, this is where the power of UDL comes in. If a student just spends years simply following instructions, so open your book to 42, they're not learning math, right? They're learning compliance. And I listened to a webinar today talking about how even within our assessments, so many things are about compliance and about rewarding behavior, right? If you don't get this in, you're going to fail, as opposed to, okay, let's see what you're learning and see where you are. And so when schools prioritize agency for students, they're allowing students to make choices about how they learn and how they demonstrate their learning. And this builds the muscles that they need for adulthood. Having agency is an important part of being an adult and in the real world, that real world skill. So for me, I was a high school English language arts teacher. And I kind of, put it out there, well, what happens when you allow students to decide to design your high school English language arts course? What happens when students have some control over what it is that they're doing? So I knew a little bit about UDL. I didn't know loads. And so it wasn't a conscious, I'm going to study UDL and apply it to my classroom. And if you want to switch the slide there, Elaina, right? With that, there were conversations happening around responsive teaching and learning practices in the K-6 world, but it wasn't coming to high school very much. And because of that, all the professional learning, or in my experience, the professional learning was focused in K-6 with the intention of it going to K-12. But with COVID, that didn't happen. And so UDL was one of the frameworks mentioned, but it hadn't made its way to high school, or at least not to my high school. I was teaching grades 10 to 12, and it felt very routine and frustrating. And so this was fall 2020. We were back in the classroom after being shut down for COVID, and I actually wasn't back. I was home waiting for plexiglass to be installed on my desk. But because that could happen any moment, I was still doing everything with assessment, with planning, all of that, because if I was going to be back in the classroom the next day, I wanted to be ready. And when I did return, the feeling just amplified. Everything was routine. Everything was happening. It was very frustrating. I was showing them something, they were doing the assessment, I was passing it back, and we were kind of moving on. And it had nothing to do with what they were continuing to learn in terms of way to grow. And it was stuff that I was picking. And then the school board came out with these lead learner projects. And I got an email saying, you should, teachers are welcome to apply for lead learner projects. And what that is, they were projects supported by the district to help teachers develop skills and support their learning. And so I developed one around the idea of voice and engagement in English language arts. And at that time, when it was happening in February, March, we were into a hybrid model. We were into a fully online model. And so I did this online with the students, and I took a week of classes, which in a semesterized school is a lot. if you know semesterized high schools and how they go. And I had my grade 10s and 11s, and I talked to them about the project, and I said, look, right now, what I hear from you all is that we do the same thing in English every year. And you've done the same thing from grade 7 to grade 12, except in grade 12, you have high stakes assessments that you have to prepare for. But what I have observed is that you come in, and in grade 10, you're kind of in there. Grade 11, you've checked out. In grade 12, you have senioritis, and you're done, because there's only so many ways you can learn. Well, here is this classic poem, here's another sonnet. So we discussed it, and I talked to them about what I have to do as a teacher, because there are still rules. I still have to do the curriculum. But I reinforced to them that the curriculum is concepts. It's not content. There's nothing in the curriculum that says they have to be able to analyze a specific novel or a specific poem. And so I gave them time to brainstorm. What would they learn? I surveyed them. What do you want to see? How do you feel about English? And then I kept, every day I would come back with the results of the day before and get them to build on it. So I got them to discuss and look at ideas they wanted to have. I wanted them to even point out some media pieces. They wanted pieces by people that they knew, right? So doing a TED Talk or a video by Tony Hawk versus a Shakespearean sonnet. They wanted that kind of thing. They wanted to have more modern pieces that understood what it was like to be a teenager and a learner in this particular world, especially since, these kids were going through high school and unprecedented times. And that was really difficult. And so put this together, and I then kind of said, how do you want to show this? And so they told me about how they wanted assignments, and they told me about how they wanted choice in what they did, whether it was the assignment or the piece that was on. They told me they wanted to have different ways to show their learning. They wanted to be involved. They kind of went, okay, cool, let's do it. Right. So I took all of that and I redeveloped how I was offering English language arts. And I talked to other teachers in other schools to get some ideas, but it grew very much from what the kids said. So I think next slide there now, please. They wanted that choice, and they reinforced they wanted to have assignments about their thoughts and feelings and getting into what that actually meant. And I thought, okay, how do I build that? How do I develop this so that I'm doing what my job, my literal, give the curriculum, but also I'm doing it in a way that honors the students. And so I guess if we go to the next slide.
Alison, if I can interrupt, and I just went to put it in the chat, but I think it's really important. What I love about your story is, well, a lot of it, but you are allowing students to have voice in your classroom, choice in what they learn, how they learn it, how they show you they've learned it. But also, it takes a lot of courage and flexibility on your part as the teacher to let all of the things go and do put into practice what they are asking you for.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And that was,
That's
I mean, it's not always easy. We are taught as educators to be that person who is the expert in the room. And I had to allow myself to not be the expert. And I think that's how I started it, talking to them about, like, I'm the expert on the curriculum, but let's develop this material. And so they, they really, the kids that were involved, I mean, I had all of these kids, they were online and they were into it, right? They really wanted to be heard about this, right? So it came down to, like, they wanted that active part of being part of the course. And it turns out, what they really wanted, and the next slide kind of summarizes it, right? What they wanted was agency. They wanted to feel part of their learning. They wanted to feel like what they were bringing to the room mattered. So I made changes throughout the rest of that year, but then I started the following year with a course designed basically by the students' voices that allowed those students who happened to be my class again, but also the students who were in it, to be empowered with their agency. I gave theme units with a focus of the application of skills based on what they said they needed to know. Like, there were certain things they wanted to know how to do, they needed to know how to do, and I would give goals and for every unit and every assessment, and there would be self-assessment happening as well, so that they knew why we were doing something, but also what it meant to show that they understood it. I gave choice in assignments, the form that it was in, and the materials. And for my level 3s in particular, I gave passion projects, which was basically like, I can't even give you a marking scheme because it's whatever you want to do. And so there were things that were non-negotiable, like choice and assessment form and materials didn't mean, oh, I can, draw a children's book as opposed to writing an essay. They still had to write an essay, right? That's part of the curriculum, but they had choice on the question that they answered, and they had choice on the material that they addressed in that essay, so that they knew the goal was to write an essay, for example, but they had ways to address it themselves and have a way to kind of analyze themselves. Like, how did I do in this? And how did I feel about it? So, that was really the crux of it all. And the students responded so positively. They really got involved. And when I interviewed them at the end of the course, basically that was their passion project. They discussed it with me, but we also discussed what their final grade would be and what they thought, how they thought they did. And I had students say, well, miss, I wasn't going to do that project. I was, had a lot going on. But then I realized it was all about me. And I was like, oh, I can do this, right? Like, I do understand these things. I just, I have the ability to do it around my particular content. And like, one kid even was like, sneaky miss, this is all about perspective. And I was kind of like, okay, yes, it is. How do you take your perspective? How do I take my perspective? How do we make it all work? And one kid, it was a little heartbreaking in some ways, but it was such a moment when they said, before I used to just study the terms, write the answers, and do the work. And they said, when you said there were no tests, no grades at the start, I wanted to throw up. As the course went on, I realized what I was using, I was using what you were teaching in my other classes. Discussion of and application of the terms meant I understood them more and wasn't just reciting them. I like it. So they had choice, but they also had that application to their lives. And they had the ability to explain, oh, well, this didn't go well, but I've reflected, I've considered why, and I feel I met this goal or I went one way or another with it. And it came down to really what's on the next slide, as they went through. And, they learned what choices to make for them. And sometimes they did that through success, and sometimes they did that through learning a little more about themselves and what they, were stronger in and the best way to show their knowledge, but tried to give them a space that that's what they could do. So that was really how my classes went. And I look at that and I kind of go like, that was just, it was hard and it was a struggle sometimes, but it was beautiful. And just seeing the kids' faces light up, especially in the Passion Project, when they were either discussing their research into Margaret Atwood and, developing works around that, or they were discussing how they researched how to, bake bread with their grandmother, right? Like it all just came together in a way that I felt good about it, but from the comments of the kids, they felt good about it as well, because it doesn't really matter how good I felt if the kids were struggling, but it was an added bonus to have that positive feeling and that positivity as a teacher. So there's so many other things I do want to say, but you'll have to come back and hear me talk next time to hear some of the more specific stories. But Elaina is going to talk about her story now, which is almost the complete opposite classroom situation of mine, but brings so many beautiful moments to, I guess, to me as I hear it, as well as a learner.
And I really like what you just said, Alison. It is kind of the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah,
I know. I'm just wondering, before I dive into my story, for everybody on the call, do we want to pause? Is there anything, any questions, any pressing things that you would like to comment or ask Alison before I dive into my story? Do we kind of need a little moment to process and reflect? Or are we good to go into my story? What do you think? Any questions? Comments? All good? Thank you, Jason. Heather says, I applaud your efforts, Alison. And I will
Thank
say,
you,
being in a semesterized school, Alison would have other English partners, colleagues. So sometimes it's really, really difficult to do something different, especially when you have other teachers teaching the same course in the same slot. So, and I applaud Alison as well. And she's like what she did for that course. And it was amazing. I can't wait for you folks to hear how students reacted to that. Because there's one story, I was like, are you going to tell the story now? But I think she's going to wait until the next, wait until the next next session. Okay, so here's my story. So my story began, I would think probably 7-8 years ago. And I knew nothing about universal design for learning. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know anything about it. It was my first year as a program specialist, and I was working in the on the Burin Peninsula and Bonavista Peninsula areas, and I had 27 schools, brand new to the role, not really knowing what the role was all about. So as my job went on, I would get many requests from administrators or teachers to come into the school, into classrooms, and observe classes that teachers may be finding tricky, struggling with, behaviors, learning, all the things. So I got asked to go into a grade 1 classroom. A seasoned teacher. She was lovely. beautiful, loved all of her children in her room. But there were a few, one in particular that was really, they were really struggling with self-regulation. Behaviors were really, I guess, an obstacle for the whole class. So I went into this grade 1 classroom and I got to sit with this beautiful child in a group. And the teacher had given this group this book called New Shoes. And the group was asked, including this child, to read this book. And then after they had read it, they would have to discuss it. So they were all eager to participate and be ready. They opened up the book, and the whole book was about different kinds of new shoes. So it was like swimming flippers to ballerina shoes to soccer cleats to all kinds of really nicely illustrated pictures of new shoes. Before I knew it, this little child, this beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed child, took his book and he just slung it across the classroom, and the classroom just disrupted. I didn't know what just happened. I had no idea what just happened. Fast forward, the end of the day comes and I speak to the teacher and she said, "See, I told you. Now, how are we going to fix this?" And I was like, oh my goodness, I felt the weight on my shoulders. I said, "Okay, tell me more about this child." This child came from a family whose parents were suffering from addictions. He was in foster care, had been in foster care for a few years, and at this particular given time, his nan was hoping to get custody of him. And it broke my heart in 2 and 3 and 4 pieces. And then I reflected and I thought about that. I said, this child did not see himself in this book. Like, when did he ever get a chance to have new shoes? So then it started I started being curious about our classrooms and the things we're getting our students to do and all the things. At the same time, and Alison alluded to it in her story, our province released and I guess initiated a new policy in K to 6, kindergarten, grade 6, called responsive teaching and learning. And in this policy, and if you're familiar with UDL in United States and Katie Novak's work, it's similar to the MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports. So this policy basically brought in a tiered approach to learning where, in, I guess, on paper, in theory, if we have strong universal tier, then the number of students who would need special education would be less because we're catching them and we're giving them what they need in that universal tier. So I was trying to learn this policy because I had to provide the professional learning for schools around it. And on paper, it's solid. On paper, I'm like, yes, this is what we need. This is going to work. There are so many students right now who need extra supports. There's not enough resources, all the things. I believed in it, and I still do. However, every time I would be asked to go into a classroom, I would see things like the little boy with the blonde hair, blue eyes, throwing books. And I'm thinking, what is wrong? What am I missing? What is missing here in this situation? And then I came across this word, or these 3 words, 4 words, universal design for learning, universal design for learning. And I'm like, what is universal design for learning? And like, is this it? Is this what's missing? And I realized it was. So from there, I became really curious. And again, bringing in a brand new policy, there's a lot to this. There's a lot of learning, a lot of unlearning about how things would work. Our special education teachers, they were renamed to instructional resource teachers. Their role became different. There were reading specialists introduced to schools. There was learning commons. There was a whole lot of changes happening. But I focused on universal design for learning, and I needed to know more. So I became my own learning journey around that in itself. Then COVID happens. and we all knew, we were, home. So I had lots of time to learn. And UDL started showing up in other places, in our policies, in our documents. What I just shared there, that little circle. So that is a school development model, our school development framework that all schools in Newfoundland, Labrador it's the compass to which school improvement happens. And now, to my delight, Universal Design for Learning shows up everywhere along those pieces there. Okay. So where does UDL show up in K to 12? Well, we have a responsive teaching and learning policy that Universal Design for Learning is one of the foundational frameworks to this particular policy. Responsive teaching and learning policy is a K to 6 document right now. And as Alison alluded to, the hope is it will continue to K to 12. In the meantime, and my beautiful dear friend Carolyn Wheeler Scott had a really big piece to play in this, a teaching to diversity document, which is from 7 to 12, grade 7 to 12, was written and implemented. And again, that kind of spoke to grade 7 to 12 and some of the changes that were made in grade 7 to 12. And again, Universal Design for Learning is in there too. And these two documents, like I said, are based on these 5 different frameworks, Universal Design for Learning being one of them. And then a few years later, we come up with a new assessment and evaluation policy in NLSchools, and Universal Design for Learning is now in our assessment policy. So we have teaching, we have learning, and we have assessment, and we have UDL in school improvement or school development forums. Now, that's great. It's great. I took on UDL as like I ate everything I could get my hands and face into. I needed to understand this. I needed to learn this. I connected with Katie Novak. I listened to every podcast she had. I read every article I could get. So I'm learning. Okay. The next year came and I took on a new role. So I left the program specialist role for a year and I dabbled in a principal role. And being a principal in a smaller school, a K to 12 school, I also had teaching duties, which I loved. And I had the privilege of teaching grade 6 math. So here I am for the last 2 years, diving into eating up and spewing out all things UDL, and Alison is laughing because this is how I met Alison first. I did a ULearn session in the summer professional learning session on UDL, and Alison attended my session. So that's how we connected initially, and now we're colleagues and partners in crime as program specialist. So I was ready. I'm like, yep. I said, I'm going to show the world, show NLSchools what UDL looks like. We're on. I'm there. Boy, what I learned from that is that learning about UDL and then putting it to practice is 2 very different things. And like Alison said, it's hard work, but it was so beautiful. And I learned so much from that experience of being that UDL practitioner in the classroom. So, as Alison had said, and I realized after she did her story, we were doing this at the same time, Alison, because this was the same year that we were in school in the fall, and then we had an outbreak of COVID again, and then we went hybrid. So we were back home learning. I think it was after Christmas. So again, grade 6 math. I was dabbling with UDL, like trying to design my lessons from September till Christmas. It wasn't going so well. New administrator, do a lot of things. So when we ended up with being home, and I had to teach virtually, I had a little more time to really think about it. I'm thinking, I've got to do this. I've got to figure this out. So I started with one of my favorite units in grade 6 math on improper fractions and mixed numbers. And I sat down and I did the research. I thought about it. How am I going to design this lesson? I need my learning goal. I need to make sure I give choices in what and how students are going to respond, give choices in what they're going to do, have open-ended questions, all the things. So fast forward my story a little bit. We started, I was in the class, virtual class. I had everything ready to go, and it flopped. It was terrible. I was stomach sick at the end. There was no engagement. The kids, they were not talking. They didn't know, but it was fit to eat. So I was like, oh my God, what? Like I was devastated. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I sat back and I reflected and I'm thinking, okay, what happened here? I'm thinking, what did I not anticipate being barriers in this particular situation? So again, I went back and I reflected. I'm like, hold on now. Do they even know what a fraction is? I'm asking them about improper fractions. So I anticipated so many barriers that I didn't think about. Virtual world being one. Did they even know how to respond? Did they even, the choices that I gave and how they would respond, for example, using little sticky notes and using the chat, did they even know how to do that? Were they even comfortable? There were so many things. So I went back, I picked myself up, I can't even say dusted myself off, but I picked myself up and I said, okay, let's start again. So I went back, I readjusted, I redesigned, and I ended up, doing very well with things. So I started off, what is a fraction? What do you know about fractions? Your home. Where do you see fractions at home? And I taught them explicitly how to use some of the features in our Google Meet, how to use some of the features of the whiteboard that I was using to show and model. Again, explicit instruction of particular things, because options are not options and choices are not choices if kids don't know how to do that. That was a big aha moment for me. Things got a lot better and the kids were engaged more. They were talking, they were doing all the things that I had hoped they wanted to. Fast forward, we get back to school. We're back in person in the classroom for an hour. Oh boy, new problem. So I figured out the whole, okay, identify my learning goal, anticipate the barriers, figure out what types of options and choices I can give them, let them make their choices, all the things. I had that figured out. Wasn't thinking about a really big thing, their engagement. When they came back to class, they came back to school, I found myself for that 1 hour class struggling with managing behavior, independence, their perseverance was gone, the grit, being able to dig into something. If they didn't know something right away, I don't know how to do this. I was bombarded, and in an hour class, if I got 10 minutes of instruction, that is all I had. So then I had to go back to the drawing board once again. And it hit me. I was like, it's that engagement piece and that full principle in our UDL guidelines, because I was doing okay with representation, I was doing okay with action and expression, but I had forgotten about that part. So I just want to share a few pictures from my classroom to illustrate we were doing a lot of different things here. And again, it's still around improper fractions. So again, the firm goal was there, giving them options and choices was there, but that engagement piece, that self-regulation piece, being reflective, that was not there. Aha moment. Universally designed classrooms does not simply mean providing choices. And I know in like a lot of the work that I've done since, that is one of the misconceptions that I try so hard to dispel, that UDL is not just about giving choices. Okay. So again, to further the story for the sake of time, what changed this classroom and the learning and the environment in this classroom? I started asking them questions, not about math, but about the choices they were making. And when I started asking them to think about the choices they made and how that affected their learning, that was a game changer. The other thing that I had to do is I had to let them go. Not necessarily let them go and do whatever they want, but be okay as the teacher in the room, the adult in the room, that when I knew Carson, which we're going to meet in a second, when he made the choice of working with a group, that was not the best choice for him at that moment. But I could not tell him that. I had to let go of that control to say he needs to work with that group, but then I have to take a little bit of responsibility to get him to reflect on how that went for him. So, spoiler alert, learner agency was missing in my classroom at that moment. Okay. So I began focusing more on that reflection. And I remember as a pre-service teacher, having to do your lesson plans, and that last 10 minutes of your lesson is a reflection. But we never get to that. Time always runs out. But I started to realize the importance of reflection, that metacognition, for the self-regulation, for them to really stop and think about what they were choosing, what they were doing, and why it was important and why it didn't work. Students, people, humans need that time and need that provoking sometimes and prompting to stop and think, okay, I chose that. And how did that work out for me? And if we don't do that in a safe place, in an environment where it's okay to make mistakes, then that agency, that learner agency, is not going to be completely built. So here's a video, and I hope it's going to work with Carson. It's only a few minutes. Again, the masks is like PTSD a little bit. So this is Carson, and he loves hockey. He loves socializing. He loves talking. He loves math. Sometimes for him, settling down and doing math is hard. So he made the choice the day before to do some independent practice with a group of his friends, and it didn't go so well. And then through reflection, and you'll hear him say that, he realized that was not a good choice for him. So he decided something else the next day. So I'm going to try and play the video so you can hear his voice. Allison, give me a thumbs up if you can see it and then hear it. All right, so Carson, you decided this morning to work alone and you did your work on paper.
Yeah.
So was that a good choice for you this morning?
Yeah, because like I find when I work with other people, I get caught up in like all the going around and I don't really do my work the best I can. But when I sat down and actually thought about it, I found that I could do it a lot easier instead of working with partners and them fighting over what's right and what's wrong. So once I sat down, I just thought and knew it, and
And how do you feel about the work that you did this morning?
I felt good. I
Felt
thought I
good?
did really good.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. So that's Carson. And I began capturing their voices when I started asking those questions because I knew, again, that was a catalyst. That was a change agent for me in my own learning, but also the learning in my classroom. So the rest of the year, that's how our classes would go. We focused on the goals. we gave choices, and I made sure the choices that I gave them, whether it's working with materials, working with manipulatives, drawings on the board, whatever it is, they knew how to do that. And I had to explicitly teach how to use fraction tiles, for example. Everybody must do that first. They all had to use fraction tiles, for example, to understand how to use that. Because if they didn't know how to use it to solve a problem, how could that then be a choice for them to choose that's the best way that they could learn? Okay, so I focused on the reflection. I focused on goals. One day, the day that I knew this was probably like things were going in the right way, a student said this quote to me: "Miss, our learning goal, we achieved it. We did it. We can really do math." So that was the moment. I was like, yes, okay, we're on track. And it was at that moment that they owned their learning. And at that moment, I didn't have a name for it. I didn't have a name to name what had happened and what had transpired in my classroom. But when the UDL Guidelines 3.0 came out, and the wording and things changed within that, and it became apparent the ultimate goal of UDL is learner agency, I realized that learner agency was what happened and what I built through all the mistakes and all the things in my classroom. But that's where we ended up. Those kids had agency. They knew that we were a community of learners. We were a family, that we all kind of stuck together through it all, and that they could learn math, and they did. So that was kind of that was it for me. That was my story. A part of it anyway. There's lots more to tell after, but that's kind of where we're going to end for time's sake today.
Well, and just, I mean, that realization is only recent that we were doing these things at the same time, and that we probably wouldn't have connected in the beginning with that idea. She was working in a K-12 school where she was must have been a smaller school because Elaina was a teaching principal and teaching grade 6 math. And I was working in an inner city school in Metro that was semesterized, teaching high school English. And at first you'd go, well, there's not going to be anything the same about any of this, right? But at the same time, we, in our discussions, we kind of went, wait a second, like this, it was, that kind of our own journeys, but we had to learn, we had to basically teach the same lesson just in our own ways.
So in having these conversations between Alison and I, we realized that holy smokes, like our journey was completely different, which is the beauty, I think, of, I mean, variability, UDL, what UDL is all about. And I think this is what we want our takeaways to be, because I believe what we learned in how to get to that learner agency is possibly a way that no matter where we are right now, what context we find ourselves in, that this could be something that can start setting us all up to have that agency no matter where we are. So we realize that having clear goals, firm goals, whatever that looks like in your context, that's number one, that needs to be there. Okay, so whether it's in Alison's class, like, whether it's like that essay writing, being able to use examples, to support your ideas, or in math, being able to demonstrate understanding of a mixed number, or whatever it is that your context is, you need to have that clear goal. Because without that clear goal, what are you doing, and what's the point, and what's the purpose, what's the intention? And from the clear goal, then of course you can look at, well, what are the barriers going to be for me? What are the barriers going to be for my learners? Well, then what are the options? What are the different ways that we can get there? And one of the biggest pieces of that grade 6 journey, and I kept, I guess, hopefully emphasizing, is the fact that options and choices are not options and choices unless students, people, anybody understands how to do it, what it is, and if that's going to be the right fit for them. And then, of course, reflection. Giving, that's where that metacognition piece comes in. And I think like that's where, the self-regulation and even like executive functioning pieces can come in there. Like if people really understand, okay, I know what my goal is. I got to think about me as a learner. What do I need right now to be successful to meet this goal? Well, how can I do that? And then if they choose something and it's not working, instead of that little beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid throwing the book across the classroom, it's thinking, okay, this way didn't work for me. But that's okay because I got something else in my back pocket I'm going to try. And if I'm not really sure what else to try, then I'm going to ask. So then it's that advocacy, and that then is where the agency comes in, because believing that you have that power and capacity and control to make those choices for you. Alison, is there anything there you want to add?
No, I think those are important ideas for us to bring to our classes and bring to our situations, but also bring to ourselves, right? Like, what is our goal when we're trying to do this? What are we trying to do? What are the options and choices that are truly options, right? It isn't, well, I'll just let them do whatever, right? We had boundaries and we had specific things that were outside of our control that didn't allow us to just go off and, do a whole course on Hamilton because, we had to cover other genres and other ideas. And that reflection and that kind of acceptance going, okay, what worked here, what didn't work, and why? And building that agency for our students, but also for ourselves, and giving ourselves that grace in building that, so that, as we look through this and reflect on our journeys and pick out, well, what is it that happened, right? Those are important, not just as outward goals, but inward as well, as we approach any of our situations.
And in reflecting on all of this and thinking about the session and, the multiple conversations Alison and I have had about this, and I think about, our K to 12 classrooms and the children and the families we serve. And I think about learner agency, and I think about the power of learner agency and agency in itself. And I think about Castle's framework of self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness and all the things. And I think, holy cow, like if we can get to a place in our classrooms where every child from kindergarten to grade 12 truly understands who they are, not only as a learner, but as a human, and what they need, who are reflective, who are purposeful, and all the definitions that Cast and Katie Novak has given us about agency. Can you imagine where we are setting them up to become? Like, it's just, I feel the weight of that. And I think, how can we do better? Like, I think in my role, how can I do better as a program specialist with the teachers I serve to help them understand the power of this framework? And I don't have those answers yet. There's so many barriers. I don't want to get tangled up in the barriers, but it's it comes down to priorities of a system. And, sometimes the priorities are not necessarily, what I want to, what I like. I want UDL to be a priority, but there's all other things out there that also needs to be a priority right now. So it's like, where do we find that balance? And there's so much power in this. And having this now, this community of practice, and having people from all areas join together to continue the conversation, I think it's beautiful. I think it's an awesome start for sure. All right. So to kind of end us off, and in Allison's English world, return by closing. Is it no, well, no, closing by, is
Closing
it
by
return?
return.
There you go.
Closing by
So
return. Yeah.
I know, we've talked a lot and we've shared a lot, and hopefully we've given you a lot to think about and process, and hopefully you have all been able to see yourself in our stories in some way. Um, Thinking back now to the role that you play, think about what agency can look like for you, either as, the educator, the practitioner, the person that's helping to create that environment. What is your role in that, in building agency in your community? And from our story, was there anything at all that you have taken away from our stories, our reflections and mistakes, and maybe something, a little thing that we did that you feel you might be able to take and maybe make one little small shift in something you do to help strengthen the power and the capacity and the agency and the people you serve? Just wondering what your thoughts are on that. You can put it in the chat or just reflect, and that's okay. I'll be okay with silence for a few seconds. So Heather says, mine is accessibility. At the horizontal approach, it is the one I see folks struggling with, even in my own department. So that's what I'm working on. Thank you for that, Heather. Allison, what's something you're working on? What's one small shift that you can put you in on the spot? Because I'm
I
thinking too.
am considering more about the perspectives of others on our team in terms of their approach when it comes to geography and lived experience, and how different, even though we all are hired for this job and have the same job title, how different are each of our experiences, and how does that work into what it is that we do, and how do we ensure that all feel heard?
I agree. I think for me, like from your story, the importance of getting, well, learner or our class, which are the teachers and administrators we work with, it's getting their voice and finding out what they need. And
Mm-hmm.
for me to be more responsive, or try to be more responsive with what I can control in terms of professional learning or support. And, like, everybody's important. And, try
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledge all of what my teachers are asking for, I think. A few more comments here for the friends who will be watching this after. Heather says, as for sharing the story, the shoe book meant so much. I can picture how a child would not feel part of the community. To foster belonging, community, and to optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. Absolutely. And Amy says in social work, agency and self-determination are part of our code of ethics that we must follow in practice. I think modeling agency in the class is incredibly important because promoting agency may hopefully influence students to promote agency with service users in the community. I think to myself, how do I want students to treat service users in the community and then try to do the same in the classroom? Promote agency, flexibility, and grace. Amy, that's awesome. Yeah. And Alison, I kind of think that's kind of what you were talking about too with like with our colleagues and stuff, you know?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like how do we want this to be and have that agency? And I love that idea of the flexibility and grace with it all.
Absolutely. For sure. Lots to think about. Lots to ponder. So while a few others are finishing up their thoughts in the chat, we just want to thank you so much for your time. I can't believe, Alison, we actually finished on time. That never
We
happens.
did.
And just a little teaser, I guess. So we are presenting again, sharing more stories next time, but we are going to focus on student perspective. So today we decided to leave out some of specific information about our students and what they shared with us as per their experience with UDL. Um, I'm also going to share, I had the privilege of meeting a teacher who he was like year 29 of his career, and he just stumbled upon UDL and he fully implemented it in his classroom. He was phys ed and English teacher. And I was able to spend a full day with him, and we did like a little interview. And he actually brought in a couple of his students, and there was a grade 12 student named Claire that I was able to interview. So I'm really, really excited to be able to share some of her perspectives as a grade 12 student. Of the differences that she saw in her classes, that her teacher was pretty much implementing and practicing UDL. So that's kind of give you a little highlight, little trailer for next time. So it's pretty cool. We don't really know what we're at yet, hey Alison, but it'll come together.
It'll be fine. It'll be great.
Any questions, comments, anything at all? You're awful quiet bunch.
Well, Elaina and
Thank you,
Allison,
Jane.
on behalf of the COP, we want to thank you so much for coming. This was an extraordinary seminar, and I hope many folks working in K to 12 watch asynchronously because we are so grateful for all of your expertise and the many, many years of implementing UDL in practice. You've given us so many ideas of ways in which we can implement in our own practices, which I think are super adaptable across context. So thank you so much. I'm looking so forward to hearing more about student perspectives in April. For folks who missed our October seminar, I just want to highlight Logan St. Croix's seminar from Trans Support NL because there are so many themes between the seminar today and Logan's seminar about centering the student who is right in front of us, affirming their identity, and creating environments where students don't have to explain or justify themselves to be supported. Logan used a lot of examples from K to 12 as well. So I think it'd just be such a nice compliment if you haven't watched Logan's work to take a peek back. And we have just a couple more comments in the chat. So Jane says, thank you for this. My UDL journey is new, so I have lots to consider. See you next time. Thank you so much for coming, Jane. And Jordan, this has been such an impactful session to me. Both of your stories are so inspiring. Cannot wait for the next session with you both. And thank you both for doing this. And I think Jason Geary is trying to type something. Jason does not want to come on the mic.
How dare you?
Here, I'm going to call him out. This is so not UDL. But let's just call him out.
That's because you know how I feel about vulnerability. No, I was just going to say, I think I love the stories. You know, as a practitioner, as a parent of two neurodivergent kids, like it's so great that you're both so willing to be vulnerable. And I put in the chat, I think, and Amy and I were going back and forth. As educators, we often, you know, tell students we learn from mistakes, we learn from failure, and as teachers, we don't do the same thing. We try something new, it doesn't go well, we get that kind of gross feeling, and we just to go back to what's comfortable. We know it doesn't work, but it's comfortable for us, and so I love the reminder that we need to embrace that as well. So thank you.
I love this saying, the definition of insanity is to keep doing things in the same way over and over again and expect different results. So yeah. In the slideshow, and I realize now I did not speak about it. To keep my sanity as a school administrator the year that I did that, and I kind of missed all the interactiveness with my colleagues. I started a website and I created a UDL website, and there's a link there in one of my slides. There's UDL it's called, and it should work. If it doesn't work, it just means that I need to give special permissions. But what I did in that website, you will see I started a blog, and I blogged my entire experience through the math journey. So if you want to kind of see more like a deeper dive into that, I wrote it real time, and that's how I reflect it. That's how I slowed my brain down a little bit, and I took time to write about that experience. So that's there along with other things, and I will put, and I don't do this normally, I will put a plug in for yeah, on the website. I try to start a podcast. I did a couple of things with it, but one of my, I guess, shining moments, Louis Lord Nelson, Dr. Louis Lord Nelson connected with me and invited me on to her podcast, UDL in 15 minutes. So I shared my story, because after this comes my whole learning around how I am using UDL to work with my teachers in the school and how that's transformed professional learning for me. So that's kind of what I talk about with Louis Lord Nelson in the UDL in 15 minutes. So I got that link to my website. But full disclosure, the website is older, and it was only this morning that I updated the guidelines to 3.0. So there might be some language and things in there that is like prior to the 3.0 update. But that's there too, and use it in any way that you want it, need it, whatever. And I'm hoping to go back and be able to rework that website to update it with better resources and stuff. So just want to put that there.